And welcome inside episode 129 of Breaking Bats, presented by Not For Long Media. My name is Justin Ayers. I am joined once again by my guy, Ricky Finkel. It's the trade deadline's coming up soon. Want to do a little trade deadline kind of newsy type episode to kind of break everything down. There's 1,000 storylines all circulated at the same time right now. Ricky, how are you? And first, how excited are you for this Subway Series?
I'm fired up. The Subway Series, especially as a Mets fan, I'm not sure when this will come out, but I was at the game one of the Subway Series last night. Electric atmosphere, and the Mets came away with the victory, so it doesn't get much better than that. I got to talk a little bit of trash on the way out, so always got to enjoy that. But yeah, I know, fired up for the deadline. Feels like it's one of the most exciting times of the year, which is kind of weird considering it's like not really the end of the year, not really the beginning of the year, but hopefully in the next week we'll see a bunch of different players moving around, and then things will change up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see some bigger names. I went back and kind of looked at last year's deadline for Orlando. It was a big one, but the trade deadline's weird because there's so many teams that are in this like in between mode where it's like, if we lose this series, all of you guys are gone. So I can't imagine what it's like being on like a fringy type team that's like fighting for a spot. But we'll start with a couple. We'll do the Subway Series stuff first. We'll start with the New York Yankees side. I have two Juan Soto quotes that I wanted to get your take on. Here's the first quote. Being in a place where we can win a couple championships, and even if we don't, just being in the race every year, I think that's the biggest thing for me. That's pretty telling about his long-term ambitions. Juan Soto is a free agent this offseason. If you're a Yankees fan, how does that kind of make you feel?
Yeah, I feel like at this point you can't really take, if I was a Yankees fan, anything that Soto says personally, I really wouldn't expect him to say anything that's going to slight the team right now. I wouldn't take that as a dig against the Yankees. I mean, I would honestly, if I was a Yankees fan, like, yeah, if you're here, we're going to win a bunch of games and we're going to be in the race every year. So let's make that happen. I think from the Soto side, this makes a lot of sense. He's a guy who's performed really well in the playoffs before. He's been to the top of this, top of the mountain. He knows what that moment feels like. So yeah, why not keep doing it all over again and stay in the race? But we'll see if trying to think of a bad team up here. If the White Sox throw him $700 million, we'll see if he rejects that or not. See how serious he is about winning.
It's interesting that he's kind of laying out his like plans for what he wants to do as a free agent, because some guys like Chris Bryant, no offense to Chris Bryant, just wanted to get some money. There's nothing wrong with that. He got like 180 mil from the Colorado Rockies. He'll never be in the postseason, probably. Never have to worry about that. So some guys are in it for that. Some guys take less to go to a winner. This kind of tells you where Soto's mind's at. The other quote that really got Yankees fans up in a tizzy on social media was, quote, "It's going to take more than two guys to go to the World Series and win it." Talking about Aaron Judge and himself are the ones carrying the Yankees offense. And the first thing I saw was somebody quote tweeted and said, "Yep, he's gone." It's just like, I think, if Yankees fans are frustrated with the New York Yankees lineup, I think Juan Soto is way more frustrated because there's no protection. It's literally him and Judge. That's it. So, yeah, a lot of little sound bites coming out from Juan.
Yeah, I think that second quote is very telling. I think it's a little more of a nudge than the first one to the front office. Hey, maybe do something this week as the deadline approaches. Get them some help. It's funny because Severino said that a couple weeks ago. Like, he was like, "Oh yeah, I was talking trash to my Yankee friends. You guys got two hitters and no one else." And now everyone's kind of agreeing with him. I mean, I haven't heard one reporter talking about it that's been like, "Yeah, he's wrong though." No, they're dead right. Last year it was just Judge all year long. Now it's Judge and Soto. So it's crazy to me that the Yankees, that they've all almost hit a skid at the same time. I hope that some of those guys turn around for them, and then maybe they get some guys who can come in and start producing right away too.
It's funny to think about, like, the Yankees trade deadline needs are literally name a position, and that's what they need. They need first, second, third starters and relievers. It's crazy to think that, like, the New York Yankees are in a position like they're like, what's their record right now? The Yankees are 60-43, and if, from an outsider's perspective, you're like, damn, they're crushing it. But the month of June, they went 14-13. That month, Judge hit 350. Soto and Judge hit 350 combined. The rest of the team combined hit 220. Since going 50-22, they've gone 10-22. This is a team that has been a complete 180 from the absolute juggernaut the first however many games, 72 games of the year. It's crazy to watch.
Yeah, And it's crazy, like game like last night, for example, with the lineup that they were throwing out there. I mean, you could tell it was with Javy Jones leading off, JD Davis in the cleanup hole, and who was the catcher? Carlos Narvaez, some guy who I've never heard of. I mean, I hope he's doing well, but no disrespect to Carlos Narvaez, Javy Jones, and JD Davis, but those shouldn't be the guys that are protecting Soto and Judge on a $300+ million roster. So we'll see what Cashman does.
It was working out in the beginning part of the year because they had like Verdugo was driving everybody in, and Anthony Volpe was this revelation batting leadoff, and Volpe the first 2 months of the year batted 282. So in June and July he batted 218. So the guy that everybody was hyping up, they're like, this is the year of Anthony Volpe. He's the next Derek Jeter. He's the shortstop of the future. And then you're like, oh God, we can't even play him anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what his stats are off the top of my head, but I think recently he's been trending up a little bit. So, he's a good kid. Hopefully he can figure it out. And I know last year he got a little bit pull heavy and was trying to get some balls out of the field there at Yankee Stadium. But this year it seemed like he was spreading around a little bit more. So hopefully he gets back to that. And I think honestly he was a perfect table setter for Judge and Soto. At the beginning of the year we were saying like, yeah, the Yankees only have 3 hitters, and we were including him in that conversation. Hopefully, I think that player is still there. We just need to see him kind of reestablish himself and get back and get comfortable again. But ideally, I think the best of the Yankees has him in the leadoff spot.
Yes. He's an excellent table setter. He's fast. He hits homers. He's a complete, like, what you want as a leadoff hitter.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned that, like, even last year, the Yankees were like only Aaron Judge. Some people were comparing this to like that to this year to that 2022 and 2023, where it was like Judge was going on this historic home run tear and the rest of the lineup was so bad. Judge's historic run in the second half of 2022, his slash line was 349, 502, 784. The rest of the lineup was 223, 292, 360. I don't know how Brian Cashman can be sitting there watching every game every night. Well, this has happened for the last like 3 seasons in a row where it's like 1 or 2 guys and nobody else, and just being like, yep, we're killing it.
Yeah, it's surprising that they haven't blown it up yet. I mean, I know this year there were some changes, more changes were made. They brought in a Verdugo. I think originally the plan wasn't for DJ to be playing every day. They brought in Grisham and made a couple of moves on the perimeter or on the edges. But, at some point, you just got to take a wrecking ball. I'm wondering, I've heard a couple of people talk about this, whether or not this is the deadline. Maybe they trade Glaber ahead of his free agency, knowing they're not going to re-sign him, see if he can bring back anything at all. Maybe they get rid of Verdugo. Maybe they move some things around. They've got Jason Dominguez in the minors, so there's someone to take that outfield spot if they were to move Verdugo. But yeah, I'm curious if this is finally when Cashman takes a wrecking ball to the team and tries to remake it as much as he possibly can.
If you're a Yankees fan, is your hope right now to have that kind of miracle trade deadline? I just can't imagine because, they have Jason Dominguez, they have Spencer Jones. Theoretically, those guys could be traded for some top of the level guys, but I don't know if those kind of impact bats are out there like that can fill every hole. And 2, I don't know if the Yankees would want to be trading every prospect they have for, a stretch run in this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're somewhere between wanting to blow it up and then also hoping a couple of your guys, figure it out. I mean, this has been maybe a 2-month long prolonged slump now for Verdugo. Probably the same for Volpe. You got to hope that Wells at some point, I mean, I know he's turned around a little bit recently, but he can kind of establish himself as the top prospect he was. Yeah, because like you said, there's not that much out there. I mean, you think maybe a Rengifo from the Angels is an option. Who knows if McMahon's going anywhere in Colorado? They seem to love him. Other name I saw with Jonathan India was a guy who I thought would be really interesting in the Bronx. Obviously, you take away all his power and you cut his hair and shave his beard, but maybe he can still do it.
Yeah, it's like when Johnny Damon went there after the Red Sox. Let's do the other side of the Subway Series. We'll do the New York Mets side. I think this is a way better position to be in at the trade deadline is that of the New York Mets, where they have this kind of great pitching depth. They have positional player depth. They have great young guys that are all coming on at the same time. What do you think the state of the Mets is heading into the trade deadline?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting team to watch, specifically being the Mets, because it really feels like you had a front office that up until about a month and a half ago was excited and ready to ship everybody out of town and build up the farm system. I mean, Pete was probably going to be gone. They've got 4 or 5 pitchers on 1-year deals who they were probably going to be expecting to trade and kind of rebuild the farm system in David Stearns' image. But he just recently came out and said we're buying Pete Alonso's off the table, which personally I love. You're in a wild card spot right now. You've got guys playing well. You've got players, Lindor, Nimmo in their prime. Why not go for it? I don't think I see them making any really big moves. I would be surprised if they traded away a Jet Williams, a Drew Gilbert, any of these guys they got at the deadline last year. That's just not really Stearns' MO. And, they don't really need – there's not an obvious spot to get a big impact bat in the lineup. There's not an obvious spot. There's not a need for an ace-level pitcher that's not even out there on the market anyway. With Senga coming back, the Mets are kind of in a pretty easy decision-making process right now, which is just fix the bullpen as much as possible. They've started doing that a little bit on the edges already, but that's kind of where I'd want to see them turn their focus. I almost had a heart attack last night watching Jake Diekman pitch to Soto and Judge.
You're right. It's such a great position to be in at the deadline where you're not desperate and you're not trying to all right, well, how many top prospects do we have to get rid of to get somebody? A bullpen arm at a deadline is nothing. Bullpen arms at the deadline are very plentiful. If you're bad teams don't need to hold on to good relievers. So that's an easy thing to take off the top. It's the closer is always the first one to go off a bad team. So yeah, this is a pretty enviable position. I feel like the New York Mets are in, and it's cool that they're keeping Pete Alonso because I know that was a big thing this whole offseason was he wants all this money. They're not going to give it to him. All right, well, we're going to ship you out in July. It's a pretty good spot to be in.
Yeah, I mean, things could be a lot worse. I mean, if we were having this conversation in May, I would have been telling you Severino's gone, Quintana's gone, Manaya's gone, Pete's gone. They were having conversations about Nimmo too. I mean, all these kinds of crazy things. It's just anyone available. But yeah, like I said, it's definitely very refreshing, and it seems like the lineup's kind of figured out. There's a couple guys moving in and out of the outfield. Jose Iglesias is getting his starts every other day, but there's not really a big gaping hole that needs to be filled aside from the bullpen. And I would definitely expect them to go get. I don't know if they're going to go get a big closer type where they've already got Diaz, but definitely a couple mid leverage relievers to kind of just move everyone down a peg and take some leverage off the young guys who are throwing pretty well. Young guys being Dednell Nunez and Budo, who've shown pretty well, but again are pretty unproven.
And Phil Maton's killing it too. It's
yeah.
I think. Well, if you think back to what the Nationals did in 2019, they needed bullpen help. They went out and got Daniel Hudson, who was an okay kind of late-ish inning reliever who had a 3 ERA, and he comes in and he's the best pitcher they have down the stretch. So yeah, there's so many teams out there that are very easy willing to part with the middle reliever.
Yeah, especially with the Mets also, we'll pay them. I mean, that's the benefit of having Steve Cohen and this is what happened with Maton, where we were like, hey, you guys the Rays obviously don't want to pay $8 million to him this year with the option for next year. So just we'll take the money. And I don't think we gave up any prospects. That's something I would expect to see. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the starting relievers, the starters got traded in that Quintana, Manaya, probably the two guys I would look at the most, just because, we've got a little bit of a depth right there, especially with Senga coming back. So we'll see how that kind of turns out.
No doubt. All right, let's hit on some other stuff looking around the league. The Detroit Tigers and Tarik Skubal. Skubal is the odds-on favorite right now to win the American League Cy Young. He's controllable for 2 more years after this, so any team that acquires him would have him for 3 postseason runs, theoretically. And if you look at baseball right now, this is a state where you throw a dart at any team on the map, they need starting pitching. It's crazy to think that, if you go on any list of trade deadline needs per team, it's pitching. So the Detroit Tigers have an asset. Everybody wants that asset. Everybody's calling them about it. Do you think that Skubal is the type of guy the Tigers should be trying to trade, though? I have some thoughts, but I'm curious yours.
No, not at this point. I would be incredibly surprised if he gets traded. I think it would take a Godfather package from someone like the Orioles who have the prospects to do it. But it's just, he's got 2.5 years left of control. They still have a young team, a lot of young players. Yes, they're not really doing too much this year, but if I'm that front office, if I trade him, that means I'm punting on the next 2 years too. And I don't know that they're ready to do that yet, especially with they do have their prospect talent is kind of at the major leagues or right there. So I wouldn't really expect them to kind of just blow it up. And if they do, this feels like kind of more of an offseason trade. Is something that I saw a lot of reporters talking about. And honestly, that's kind of something that I agree with.
It's such a great point. The Tigers aren't that bad, which is kind of surprising to think. They're only 2 games under 500. This feels like the type of guy you would keep and kind of build around. They finally had some winning momentum on their side for the first time. Their last winning season was, get this, 2016. It's the last time they posted a record over 500. Their prospects, like you mentioned, like Colt Keith, looks like he's finally turning into the player, but he thought he would. I just don't think, and I've heard so often because I live in the Maryland DMV area, it's like the Orioles. Orioles are going to go out, they're going to trade Skubal. I'm not trading Jackson Holliday. You're going to have to pry him out of my cold, dead hands because there's no way that we're trading the best prospect in baseball, who is going to be a perennial all-star, for Tarik Skubal, where there's other rotation options out there for the Orioles that don't require them to give up all of their top prospects. They have so many of them, but I feel like Holliday is the one that just blows my mind, that people are like, screw it. Just put him in a deal. We'll get a pitcher, whatever. No, that's your second baseman of the next 10 years. Don't do that.
Yeah. I feel like they do also still have the prospect capital to get it done without a Holiday. And maybe Gunnar going berserk this year makes it a little more manageable to trade him, but I still wouldn't expect that. I look at them more of a landing spot for Crochet than I do for Skubal.
Yeah. Oh, here's the other thing. Ken Rosenthal. The reason I will say is that when he was asked whether or not they would consider trading Jackson Holliday, Rosenthal said, the reason I will say no is because none of the starting pitchers who are available are good enough for a Jackson Holliday. Even Skubal 2.5 years left to control, 6 years of Holliday, who's probably going to be an all-star position player. So, there's no chance they're doing Holliday. I don't know if the Tigers would trade Skubal to the Orioles if it didn't have Holliday in it, though. I know they have all the other top position player prospects, but they don't have a good shortstop.
Yeah, I'm sure that if I was the Tigers, that's probably where I would start the conversation. Because again, you don't need to trade him. There's no incentive to get it done. I mean, obviously, 3 playoff runs versus 2, but getting it done now versus in the off season, when there'll be a lot more suitors.
You mentioned Garrett Crochet. I've heard his name floated around so often with the Los Angeles Dodgers. He's second in the majors right now with 157 strikeouts. You got him for, like Skubal, 2 years, so 3 postseason runs. Crochet just is a fascinating case study in what are teams' risk assessments like for a player. Crochet's never thrown, he has thrown 111 innings this year. The most he's thrown in a professional season before this was 54 1/3. He had Tommy John in 22. He missed all of that. He missed some 23 time. I look at Garrett Crochet as a ticking time bomb of a pitcher. Obviously Skubal is the 1-1 starting pitcher everybody wants, but given all of that, would you still have Crochet as the guy that everybody would try to get after?
Yeah, it kind of feels like those two are in their own tier as opposed to anyone else that's on the market. I'm not even sure who else would be in the conversation with those two. I do personally, I love the fit with him and the Dodgers. I think that would be slam dunk, no brainer, get it done. The Dodgers have some young pitchers that they can trade that, maybe performing well, performing not well, but they do obviously always have that intense prospect capital. But the reason I love it is because they have a drastic need for a starting pitcher right now, but they don't necessarily need a starting pitcher in October. Eventually, you got to think that at some point, Glasnow's coming back soonish. You got to hope Yamamoto will be back. They still got Buehler figuring things out. I think Bobby Miller is also trying to figure things out in AAA right now. We've got a lot of young arms. I know Dustin May just got hurt. Kershaw should be back at some point this week. But I think they're the one team that can afford to trade for him, have him start for a couple of weeks, and then say, okay, now it's time. We're going to put you in the bullpen and just have another weapon out of the pen coming in for October. And they also seem like they have the culture and the staff and the trainers that they're the one organization that can really handle that correctly. I'd be nervous if I was a lot of other teams that don't have this history of, developing players like they do and handling that well. Then I'd be nervous.
We interrupt this episode to bring you a word from the official sponsor of Not For Long Media and the Breaking Bats podcast, the original Fudge Kitchen. It is a staple of the Jersey Shore with 6 locations in Cape May, Wildwood, North Wildwood, Stone Harbor, and Ocean City. The original Fudge Kitchen makes all of their fudge in store, guaranteeing a delicious product, so stop by and let them know that Not For Long Media and Breaking Bats sent you. Check them out online at fudgekitchens.com as they are shipping fudge and sweet treats all across the country. Now back to the episode. I think the only team that would make sense for him is the Dodgers, because you're right. They don't have that immediate need or they don't have that long-term need for like, hey, July, hey, the dog days of August and September, we need you to make every start every 5th day because we're desperate for starting pitching. If a team is desperate for pitching, I would not go to Garrett Crochet at all. I've heard people theorize the plan for him would be like they would have him as a relief pitcher, and then once the playoffs came around, before that, they would have to like ramp him back up again, which just feels like way too much tinkering with somebody's arm in the course of a season to be like, stretch out. Now don't do that. Now get long again.
That's a terrible idea. He would 100% get hurt doing that. Because, like, how long do you need to stretch out again before the playoffs anyway, to the point where how long are you to have him where it's really renowned? I think the play for him, and this is kind of why I like it for the Yankees a little bit too. I think they'd be interesting, where you can have him start for a couple of weeks and then, come out of the pen at the end. Because you have a team like the Yankees, Dodgers probably has their 3 postseason arms already worked out. Yankees, you got Cole, we'll say Stroman, we'll say Rodon if he's figured it out. Who knows? Heal's kind of in the same area, but the Dodgers with Glass now, Kershaw,
Stone.
I forgot about Gavin Stone. Bueller, you got to think he'll be better at some point. Yamamoto will be back. I mean, I think that's my prediction. It seems like they're ready to make a splash too.
Garrett Crochet is not the rotation saver just because he's striking everybody out and has like 12 strikeouts per 9 right now. It's not going to happen. Here's a fun Dodgers stat I saw today, though. The Dodgers have played in 15 straight postseason games going back to 2021 in which their starting pitcher has not recorded an out in the 6th inning. And I went and looked, and remember the NLDS last year? The pitcher who went the deepest into a game was Emmett Sheehan, who went 3 2/3 in relief of Clayton Kershaw, who had another playoff Kershaw moment implosion. So last year's Dodgers rotation, if you think about that super team, couldn't do anything in the playoffs. So do you think that's going to change this playoff run with their current crop of arms?
You gotta hope. I mean, at some point, like, something's got to give. They'll have I know in the past they've had really strong weapons out of the pen. I don't know that they have that as much this year, being a shutdown bullpen. And then maybe they're a little bit more inclined to give some room for Yamamoto or Glasnow to kind of figure it out and battle into the 7th. But maybe that's the reason that they've been struggling so much in the playoffs, is that they haven't been getting depth out of their starters.
Yeah, well, I think Glasnow is the stopper. I think Glasnow is going to be the guy starting game 1. He's going to pitch 5 or 6 innings and give it to the bullpen. Like, yeah. Also, that's just wild that they haven't had anybody give them any length. Like, we joke about playoff Kershaw, but like, goddamn, dude, like, come on.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that he still hasn't performed that well in the playoffs. I mean, it's been how many opportunities, how many years? This has kind of been it kind of confirms a lot of my thoughts and the philosophy on the playoffs, which is in October you need guys with like the best stuff. And we love Kershaw, but at this point in his career, I don't know that he has the stuff that he had 7 or 8 years ago. So you need a Glasnow throwing 98 by guys who can make a little bit of a mistake and still get away with it. And I don't know that Kershaw at this point in his career has that. And that is kind of why I've told myself I think that's why he struggles in the playoffs.
Ooh, I like that. I don't think I've heard it articulated like that. Yeah, you're right. That's why bullpen arms are so deadly. It's why the pitchers who have the best stuff, when it comes time to October, and if they have a Crochet who can, give them 3 innings of, lights out ball, maybe not as a starter, it's pretty valuable.
Very valuable.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk a little shortstops, because last week we talked about Bobby Witt Jr. and how MLB has not done a great job to this point of hyping him up. A lot of people chimed in on that. I made a video out of it. Here's some of the kind of feedback I saw. They said BWJ has no aura. That's a big term on the internet right now. They said BWJ, if you play in important games, you'll be recognized more. The Cardinals dominate the Missouri area that he plays in. Yep. And they said Gunnar hasn't done anything either, and he still gets glazed for some reason. So thoughts on some of the feedback we've received on BWJ?
I think the most interesting point there is probably the Cardinals one. I think I don't know the Missouri area and the split between fans too well, but that definitely makes a lot of sense. Being a little bit of a smaller market and not having as much fan base. I don't know if I agree that he doesn't have an aura. I mean, just watching him walk around in the field definitely carries himself in a certain way that you would expect a premium ball player to. And the Gunnar comp, I think Gunnar probably gets a little bit more hype is because he was the first of this crop of young Orioles that were so like the Orioles were so bad for such a long time, and Gunnar was like really the first one to establish himself as like an absolute stud and a star, and we're seeing it more this year. And you know, the whole Jackson Holiday conversation with the hype he got kind of also rubbed off onto Gunnar Henderson, because every time you would say, "Hey, look, Jackson Holiday, he's the 7th best prospect in baseball." Oh yeah, well Gunnar's number 5. He's up there too. Oh, Jackson Holiday, he's hitting 330 in AAA. Gunner's got 10 bombs in a month in the majors. Like, you know, it kind of, you know, I don't know if those numbers are right at all, but that's kind of what it felt like, where he was a year or two ahead, and now we're kind of getting that presumable bump where he's almost establishing himself as a shortstop of the future over Holiday in Baltimore.
I think the thing with Gunnar, though, is that last year he was on a 101 win team that went to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Bobby Wood Jr. has never even sniffed the playoffs. He will this year. I'm very confident in the fact the Royals are going to be good, but that's one of the reasons why, his first full season in the bigs last year, Gunnar Henderson was on a ball club that was one of the best teams in baseball during the regular season. And they're like playing these big games, and it's him and Adley Rutschman and like that young crop of Orioles who all have blonde hair, or like all just doing their thing and you know, doing the stuff on the big time stage. I think that's why people more associate being good in a shortstop with Gunnar right now. And people don't necessarily put BWJ at the top of their mind. But I have some BWJ stats that'll maybe help his case for aura, which would just be a very funny premise for like a Gen Z baseball podcast. It's like top 5 guys with aura. So here's some BWJ stats for the Royals. Bobby Witt's currently leading baseball in hits, runs, and games played this season. The only player to finish a season leading MLB in all 3 was in 1896. Since the All-Star game, he was 13 for 16. He hasn't struck out, and he has swung and missed at just 1 pitch. I think we're making a pretty strong case. Also, I think he was leading baseball in F-WAR, which Fangraphs WAR. I think that's what that's called. I mean, this is going to be a very fascinating stretch run here between BWJ and Gunnar Henderson, because it's pretty close if you do the baseball comparison for them.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a right or a wrong answer realistically between those two. I mean, Bobby might give you a little bit more speed. Gunnar gives you a little more pop. But, I mean, they're both the future of the position and going to be incredible players. Probably an MVP debate that we'll have for a couple of years to come. Which
is awesome. It's what baseball needs when guys are going at each other, same position, same league. Yeah. It's awesome. I have a shortstop for you that is not the shortstop of the future, but I think we all need to bring him back up again just for posterity's sake. I'm talking about former Mets legend Javy Baez, because I saw a tweet the other day and it got me thinking. I think people need to be reminded of how awful of a baseball player this guy is. It said he has the lowest lowest OPS of any qualified hitter ever, 451. His OPS plus is 27. 100 is league average. And earlier this month, he got roasted by the Guardians play-by-play guy when Javy got hit by a pitch. He said, quote, "Look, Javy, you are way under 200. Nobody's hitting you on purpose." Is anybody having a worse summer than Javy Baez? Maybe Drake? I don't know.
Yeah, it's close between those two. I mean, I don't think we've ever seen anyone fall off a cliff quite the way that Javy has. And, you know, I don't know if he gets enough comparisons to the Chris Bryant deal. Is something that I've been thinking about. You know, he went to a situation where he was supposed to be kind of the big piece on a winning team, kind of help lead the team into that new generation. Obviously, that blatantly hasn't happened. And I just don't ever think that was the good fit for him and a good way for him to use his talents and kind of the way to get what's best out of him. We saw he was at his best with the Mets, you know, the year before that after the deadline, when he wasn't the main focal point of the offense and he was kind of allowed to just be like freaking Javy, just go out and ball, dude. Like, no one's looking at you to be the leader. When he was in Detroit, like it's a little bit, it's a different vibe in the clubhouse. It's a different expectations of the team. I think he's a guy who, you know, if the Detroit Tigers started playing winning baseball again, I kind of think he would start to do better. I just don't think he's good in a losing situation.
6 years, $140 million contract. He signed with the Tigers. He's making $25 a year. Yeah, I mean, I think that they thought they were closer to being competitive than they were, and he was kind of going to be the guy to be like the mentor, a little bit of an older grinder, hustle every ground ball, fast, plays hard. Good guy. If you watch a Tigers game with him playing shortstop, it is hard to watch. Yeah, it is not the summer of Javy Baez right now, and I think the Tigers are like is there any way we could put him in a Tarik Skubal deal, dump a bad contract? Probably have to lose the prospect capital, but damn, we got to get rid of this guy.
If they used Tarik Skubal to dump Javy Baez's contract, that might be one of the most inept things any front office has done, and that includes.
There's been several times, throughout the course of baseball history, where you're like, will you please just take this guy off our hands? It's not working. So yeah, if you ever just want to feel better about yourself, just go check out what Javy Baez is doing in Detroit. I mean, good God. Okay, I saw this on Twitter. This is just the segment where I just list stuff that I found on X. So when I was surfing the bird, here's a tweet from John Heyman, and it might have been one of the harshest ricochet shots that any player has taken ever. John Heyman said, "I want to congratulate Jordan Lyles. If this is it for him, he made $53 million for a career negative 2.5 WAR. He may be only a replacement level as a pitcher, but as a negotiator, he's top shelf." So what he was referring to is the Royals outright released Jordan Lyles. He had been on leave for personal reasons since April. The team decided that it wasn't worth it trying to ramp him back up again to pitch down the stretch because they were trying to get into the playoffs and everything. But in terms of a ricochet shot, if you're Jordan Lyles, just scrolling the bird and you see, what did I do? Why am I in here?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough for Jordan Lyles. I think he brings what he brought for the last, 14 some odd years of his career was just something that isn't really valued by numbers, being just consistency, 200 something innings every year, just being a guy who takes the ball every fifth day, which is a really valuable thing to have, as your fourth or fifth starter, even if you're throwing it at a 4.5 or a 5.5 ERA or whatever it is or has been. Yeah, it's a tough one for him to. Wouldn't want to just be waking up and see that written about me.
It's what the hell, man? Just trying to have breakfast. Yeah, Jordan Lyles serves a purpose in baseball that's not glamorous. It's the fact that every team has innings to fill. There's a certain number of innings every year that has to be thrown by somebody. It's not all going to be aces. You're not going to have 5 aces in your rotation. There's going to be some ugly 4 or 5 run ball games that have to be had. And Jordan Lyles for the last 14 seasons was that guy. Career ERA 5.22. If you average his 162 game average, it was 30 plus starts. It was 170 innings. He hasn't had an arm injury in 7 or 8 years. This is just durable, consistent, number 5 starter. And a lot of people will look at it how the hell is he thrown 14 years? It's because there's a need for that in baseball. It's the super utility guy that bats 210 but plays for a decade. You're why is he on our team? It's well, somebody has to play every position. So it's just there's positions in baseball that are these gritty, kind of unsung heroes of every squad. And that was Jordan Lyles. So hopefully if he decides to come back and pitch again, there's going to be no shortage of teams that definitely need some innings to be had.
Being a replacement level pitcher for 14 years is nothing to scoff at.
In the age of arm injuries, guys having multiple Tommy Johns and all these elbow issues, to have Jordan Lyles go out there and throw not that hard and chew up some innings. It's the Orioles when they signed Matt Harvey after all of his crap. And at first we're Matt Harvey. And then we're looking, it's he's giving you 5 or 6 innings every night. I don't know. It's not, it could be worse.
Did not think I'd be talking about Matt Harvey today, but yeah, totally.
It's the first person I thought of because they were well, this guy has got some legal issues. He's not the Dark Knight anymore, but he's healthy. I don't know. There's something to be said for having an arm that's still attached.
It's the scene in Moneyball. I'm not signing you for what you were. I'm signing you for what you are right now.
The David Justice. I'm not paying you. The Yankees are paying your salary. Yeah.
That's what they think.
Yeah, that was such a great reference. All right, couple more things. My last one. If you listen to this podcast, I have affinity for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I've gone to so many Pirates games. They're just a fun, hardworking bunch of fans up there and a bunch of yinzers. Paul Skeens mania has taken over the Pirates. Since his debut, they are 34-28. Right now, they are 2 games over 500, 1 game out of a wild card. This for a team that hasn't been to the playoffs since 2015. This is a fan base that is hungry. They're loyal. They packed PNC Park every night, especially during the Phillies series, the Battle of PA there. Did you see the Skeens ovation and everything he did last night on Tuesday?
Yeah, he had a pretty good day. Tough way to take your first loss, going 8-2 or 8-3 with 2 runs, but I guess that's the state of the Pittsburgh offense. I thought it was cool. I know everyone showed up wearing the Skeens mustaches to the game. I thought that was pretty cool too.
Even the dogs had Paul Skeens mustaches on at PNC Park.
You gotta hope
that
they
was
buy.
Yes, for a team that is in a spot where they could make it to the playoffs for the first time in almost a decade, they have to add some bats. I don't know what is out there right now for them, but if you're a betting man, which I think both of us are you taking Paul Skeens NL Cy Young right now?
Might have to. I don't know if they're. I'm trying to think of what other names in the NL Cy Young race there are. I feel like Skubal's gotten a lot of heat attention for the AL race. Maybe he's run away with that, but I don't know if there's a name like that for the NL one.
I saw Sale and Wheeler are actually ahead of Skeens last time I checked the odds. Sale's plus 140, Wheeler plus 200, Skeens plus 400.
Yeah, so I think the one thing with Skeens you got to worry about is the innings number. I know he's probably pretty close to what he was at last year now. So you just got to be a little careful with that. Wonder what the Pirates are going to do. But I think there's definitely some value there. And I might log into my account as soon as we are done recording.
The innings thing is going to be a problem. I don't know, but you got to let the big dog eat. I feel like you can't do what the Nationals did to Strasburg a decade ago and be like, we're saving you for the postseason. It's like, nah, we're shutting you down. We can't do that. No. The best pitcher in baseball by far. Pirates took 2 out of 3 back-to-back series from the Cardinals and from the Phillies. So they're trending up. Just give them a little offense. Just something. Can't score runs too.
I throw something at the wall here. I was talking about earlier. Like that, I think would be a good place for a Gleyber Torres or an Alex Verdugo from the Yankees. Like one of those, they're trying to shake it up a little bit, send these guys to a playoff race where they're, they can kind of clear their head a little bit. They're not in New York. Maybe they figure it out. That's my one thought on those 2 teams trade on. I think that could work. Probably don't need to give up too much.
Low cost, high upside. Yeah, that feels like a Pirates type move. Yeah. The Pirates for so many years were very good about they would always do like the non-waiver, or they would do the waiver trade deadline or something. It would be like in August. They'd be like, "Hey, Justin Morneau's here." It's like, whoa, when did we get Melky Cabrera? All right, cool. They would just always trade in August for some reason. So yeah, maybe the Buccos will pull some magic out and get some guys at the deadline this year.
Yeah, gotta hope.
Fun to watch. All right, let's end it. We'll talk about some fringe teams that I don't know. There's a lot of teams like you were thinking about, just like could buy, could do a little selling. There's so many middle grounds. What do you got?
Yeah, it's really interesting because whatever we say now could be completely different 4 or 5 days from now if these teams go on a 5-0 or an 0-5 run. But the deadline this year really feels like it's controlled by teams like the Texas Rangers. Maybe throw the Reds in there. Who was the other one? Depending on how big the White Sox want to blow it up, there's a lot of decisions to be made. Like if the Rangers decide to trade people, I heard they were listening. They've got the 2 relievers, Yates and Robertson. They've got Nathaniel Lowe is a guy I heard them were talking about moving around a little bit. They've got some interesting pieces that can really have an impact in late in October. I know they were my World Series pick, so I'm still hoping they figure it out. John Gray, Nate Eovaldi, another 2 guys that they could move. What was the other ones I had written down?
Lorenzen, I think.
Yeah, Lorenzen's another one. The Blue Jays, like how much do they want to blow it up? How much do the Mariners want to look for a bat? Are they willing to trade one of their young arms? There's a lot of really, really interesting storylines this year. It's not a typical deadline in the sense that we've got really, really bad teams and good teams, and there's some obvious fits there. It's a lot of guys working on the margins and trading for some control. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some worse teams trade for some controllable players, like the Cubs, for example, who aren't necessarily in the run this year, but maybe they get a guy with control and add him to the team next year.
I think the problem when they added this 3rd wild card spot in here is that it really muddied the waters in terms of a trade deadline. Because if you look at it now in the NL wild card, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams within 5.5 games of a wild card spot. That's insane. The AL is a little different, obviously. It's like the Red Sox are right there and the Mariners are, but it's not as bunched up as the National League is. There's so many mediocre teams that are like 500-ish in the NL. It's like, I don't know, like the Pirates. The Pirates could be in the playoffs if they need, a game out. So Also, like, there's not that many bad teams that have assets. Like the Colorado Rockies, you're like, well, goddamn, the Rockies are 38-65. Blow it up. It's like they don't have that much. What are they going to trade? So,
Marlins
yeah,
already started.
Yes. And it's, yeah, like you said, the Marlins too. Like, there's not teams that are like dog shit that you're like, oh, that's easy. Trade everything. It's like, there's not that much out there. I don't know.
Yeah. It's an interesting deadline for sure. I think overall, though, I like this better. A lot more teams in contention, spending more money. It's better when more teams are trying to win as opposed to tanking.
It's weird to think that like your whole season about like if you're gonna be competitive for the rest of the year hinges on like 2 weeks at the end of July.
Yeah.
It's like this is the playoff time for teams that are trying to get into the playoffs where you drop a couple series in a row, all your best friends are playing for different teams. So that's got to be a complete mind fuck for all of these guys on like 500 ball clubs. It's like, you know, I make an error, we lose a game, and now my friend's playing for the Yankees or whatever. It's like, that's so weird.
Some added motivation for sure.
Yeah, got to play hard down the stretch. Tampa Bay Rays, come on, kick it into gear here. A game over 500, but I really don't want them to sell. So well, they probably are, but I don't want them to blow it up. Is maybe what I should say.
I don't think they're going to blow it up. They're a prime buy and sell team where they'll trade for some guy. You'd be like, who the hell is this guy? And then in September, he's got a 0.3 ERA out of the bullpen or something.
They're also one of those teams that's like, they're probably going to trade their all-star third baseman Isak Paredes, and people are going to be upset. But also, like, they have just like 30 other infielders in AAA that are going to be just as good. So, yeah, that's an interesting fan case study of like, I just bought this guy's jersey, and now he's not here anymore. So, yeah, no doubt. Okay, well, this has been great. Trade deadline's coming up next week. I'm sure we'll talk even more about it. So, Ricky, you're the man, and hopefully we'll start seeing some wheeling and dealing here.
Yep, sounds good. I'm excited for the next week. I'll be staying next to my phone, real careful, passing bombs.
Yes, Passan and Rosenthal tweet noties engaged. All right, we'll see you guys next week.